Hello, Adobe Creative Educators. Welcome to a very special creativity workshop. Today, we are going to be doing some very fun projects for the season for Halloween. And the creativity workshops are a place where we can come together to explore new tools, techniques, and ways to stay inspired and foster deeper learning for our students with creative tools. So thank you for joining. And if you have any comments as we share today's presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat. Feel free to share where you're calling in from, any questions that you might have. And we are really thrilled to introduce our guest presenter. So I will get started welcoming Joseph Lebrecht today.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome, Joseph. Joseph is a creative educator, an Adobe education leader, an Adobe partner by design for higher education in digital media. He regularly live streams on Behance.net. And Joseph is also an Adobe Max networking ambassador for Adobe Max coming up this week. He's also a prolific writer for LinkedIn Learning and has a new book coming out, Adobe Animate 2022 for Creative Professionals, his second edition. So I'll be sharing links to connect and follow Joseph as he shares his expertise creating spooky animations for Halloween. And I'll go ahead and allow you to share your screen, Joseph. And then as you all have questions, please feel free to add them to the chat, and I'll share those questions with Joseph as he continues. So here we are, designing spooky animations. Welcome.
Thank you, Leona. So hi, everyone. So yeah, we're going to just make some spooky animations today, and we're going to do it in a very kind of like simple way. So I know a lot of people aren't so familiar with Adobe Animate and some of the things you can do with it. So we're going to do some stuff that's very, very sort of, it's really easy to pick up and to get going, even if you haven't really used Animate before. And it's actually something that you can do with students of just about any grade level. So I teach, well, I should advance the slide when I'm talking about my teaching. So I teach for the University of Colorado Boulder. So this is higher education. I teach design students, advertising students, PR students, things like that. And I teach, all of the applications basically for Adobe Creative Cloud. And yeah, you can find my Twitter under there and so forth. But even though I'm teaching people who are going to be going out into the professional world, and I do teach on Animate in my classes, this is absolutely stuff that you can use in K through 12 and other segments as well. So I want to mention before we get into it, and Leona alluded to this, I do live stream on Behance with or alongside of a number of other Adobe education leaders as a featured Behance live streamer for education. So we just did one this morning that was like super fun. We did another kind of Halloween themed thing. We did a kind of frightening wooded painting. And I would suggest, following me there. But you can always jump in at any time. 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. It's 9 a.m. Mountain Time on Wednesdays. So, and for Adobe Max, we are looking at having some nice discussions on the Braindate platform. I'm a Max networking ambassador, which means I get some additional options from other people. But yeah, register for Max. Look on the Braindate platform for interesting stuff and join in the conversation. It's almost like a way of having just the networking stuff that we usually have at Max when it's live, but having it not live, right? So today we're going to be doing some spooky animation design. So this image here, this is something that I did on a Behance stream, a live stream like 3 weeks ago maybe. And I was just creating some little assets using Fresco. So anybody who's used Fresco before knows how fun of an application that can be. I used Fresco this morning as well to do some painting. And I do a lot of Adobe Animate on Fresco too. So what is Adobe Animate? The things you need to know about Animate if you're not familiar with it, it's part of the video, audio, and motion group of products in Creative Cloud, which is why it's got that sort of blue, violet, purple kind of logo to it now. It allows for a variety of different workflows. You can use both bitmap and vector assets. So these little guys that I made in Fresco, they are bitmap assets. I actually exported them as little PNG files. And we'll see how to use those. Animate has been around for a long, long time. So it's been around for it's over 25 years now, I believe. It used to be called Adobe Flash Professional, but now it can publish anything you want. So it can do HTML5 canvas, it can do video, it can do animated GIFs, and all sorts of stuff. So our animation goals for today are to keep it pretty simple. So we're only going to use a few different workflows inside of Animate, but we're going to use it to great effect, right? And we also want to make it spooky. So that's what we're up to today. Let's go ahead and jump out of those slides. And let's see here. All right, cool. So I've already got a document open and saved. But if you've never opened or created a new document in Animate, it can be a little weird because there's a lot of different options in terms of document types. So if I go to File, New, this is what you'll see when you create a new document in Animate. You'll have a number of different categories along the top here. So things for character animation, social animations, game, education, ads, right? So advertising, web, and advanced. And each one of these is going to get you a different set of presets. It's kind of similar to what you'd see in Photoshop or Illustrator. And if we go to advanced over here, this is where you can really get nitty gritty with the thing. You don't have to go to advanced. I always like to do so just because I can pick the specific platform that I want. So whether it's ActionScript 3.0 or HTML5 Canvas or anything, if you're doing animation in Animate and you don't worry about interactivity, you can use almost anything up here, right? HTML5 Canvas, ActionScript. If you're exporting as a GIF, if you're exporting as a video file, really any of these is going to work. For character animation, which is the first category here, notice that the platform is always ActionScript 3.0. When you see that, don't freak out. You don't have to do any sort of coding or scripting when you choose this platform. This is just the primary native platform inside of Animate. And using this, you're going to get all the options inside of Animate for your animations. So this is what I've chosen. You can pop in your width and your height here, your frame rate, and so forth. But you don't really have to worry about that too much. Just create a new document, right? And this is what we get. I've got a 600 in width by 700 in height document here. And 30 frames per second, which if we look down our timeline, we can see the 30th frame right here aligns to the 1 second marker. So Animate is a little different from if you've been working in something like After Effects or Premiere Pro before, in that it is primarily frames based, and the time is actually calculated on the frames instead of frames being calculated based on time. So it's a different workflow, and it's a more traditional workflow when it comes to motion design and animation. So let's get started here. I have some assets that I'm going to use. Let's bring those up. So as mentioned, this is some stuff I created in Fresco. I made a little ghost. And I also made a little angry jack-o'-lantern here. I also grabbed this from the free Adobe Stock library. So if you don't know, Adobe Stock does have a free library of thousands of vector and bitmap assets that you can use. Absolutely free. You don't have to spend points on them or anything like that. And that's where I grabbed this from. So absolutely free. And what we want to do is actually just pull this directly into our document. So this is a bitmap image. We can see it's a JPEG if I hover over this. So as mentioned in the slides, Animate can use both JPEG and bitmap imagery. I'm going to drag this just directly onto my stage right here. And it'll import into Animate. Of course, we can see it's pretty big, right? But that's okay, because we can use this little guy right here. This is the free transform tool. We can click on that, and then we get little transformation handles here. If I hold down my shift key, then we can transform everything really nice, right? We can also look along the side here, because whenever you have anything selected inside of Animate, you get properties for that specific object. The properties panel, it's very adaptive. So you have properties for your selected tool, properties for the object that's selected, properties for the frame that's selected, and overall document properties. And you got these tabs along the top here for that. So this is going to allow me to actually lock my aspect ratio and change my width or my height to what I want. So if I reference my document settings here, I can see that my height is 700 pixels. So let's go back to my object properties. And with that lock engaged, I'm going to set my height to 700 pixels. But I'd be interested in knowing too, as we're going through this, who uses Animate right now? Or who has in the past? Or who's interested in Animate? You'll notice here, as I position this on my stage, that we get a little bleed over into the pasteboard. That's something that you can fix really easily. And I actually like to have a little bit of bleed here. So I'm going to increase this a bit. And there's this guy right here, clip content outside the stage. If I toggle that, we can see it gets easily clipped. And now we can see sort of like a true to life kind of way of looking at our project. This is what the user is going to see if we export this as a GIF or a video file or anything else. So we want to be nice. Layer 1 right here. Let's double click on that and rename this to pattern. This is our background pattern. We're going to lock it down because we're finished with that. We don't want to do anything else with it. What I do want to do is create a sort of frame for our content. And that's what we're going to animate within. So I'm going to create a new layer by clicking the new layer button in our timeline right here. I'm going to rename this to frame. You can call it whatever you want, of course. And in the tools here, we have a number of vector creation tools. One of those is the rectangle tool, which I'm going to select right now. And notice in our tools properties over here, so these are properties for our rectangle tool, we can choose the fill and the stroke. So I'm going to change my fill to a nice Halloween-centric orange. And I'm going to disable my stroke. And before I do anything else, I want to make sure to set my grid up. This is really important if you're doing things very precisely inside of Animate. It's a great help. So I'm going to disable the pattern view here in my layers and go to View, Grid. I want to show my grid. The grid is pretty small right now. I can change that. So I'm going to go to View, Grid, Edit Grid. This is going to allow me to change my grid scale. So maybe I want to double this to 20 instead of 10. There we go. That looks a bit better. That's going to be easier to work with. And I also want to snap to my grid. So I always emphasize how important this is as you're going through and creating your content, right? So let's go ahead and start drawing out a rectangle. So I'm going to just click and drag. And notice I'm going to frame everything just like that. So now we have our frame and we have our pattern down here. Let's have a look at our pattern again. And there we go. So you can see we're creating sort of like a little, it's almost like a little greeting card or a little like animated thing for, for Halloween here. You could use this as like an invitation to a party or whatever you might want to do. And I'm actually going to take the opacity right here down to 90. on my fill color. So this is for my object. And then we can see some of that background right there. So pretty good. All right, so I'm going to lock down my frame layer too, because we're not going to animate that either. What we're going to animate is a little ghost. So we could do this in a number of different ways, right? So I'm going to create a ghost layer. And let's have a look inside the assets that I prepared again. And let's bring our little ghost in here. So I can just drag him right in here. And there he is. Now he's a little ghost in Animate. Now this little ghost might be a little too macabre, right? Because he's actually, he's got the face of a skull underneath his sort of like ghost sheet, right? So it might not be as appropriate for like, K-12. If they're scared of skulls and things. So I want to emphasize that the workflow we go through today, whether we use a bitmap image or if we use vector images, both can use the same exact workflow. All right. So you can import the ghost just like that, or you can draw the ghost. So what I'm going to do is delete that bitmap from our ghost layer because I'm going to draw the ghost. So let's turn off our visibility for the frame and pattern layer again so we can see our grid really nicely. And one of the things that works like super good inside of Animate is being able to create vector graphics through composite shapes. It's a really good way to teach someone how to sort of build up more complex graphics from very simple graphics. And that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to use circles and I'm going to use rectangles to do this. So get out of here, Doc. There we go. So let's go ahead and I think I'll start with a rectangle. So I'm going to choose my rectangle tool. And for my tool properties here, I'm going to change my fill to purple because purple and orange are nice Halloween colors. That's a little too blue, maybe. There we go. Well, I don't know. Yeah, it looks like a ghost. It's a ghostly purple, right? So I'm not going to have a stroke. I don't need that. And yeah, pretty good. So let's go ahead and draw out a little guy here. So we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 works. I want it to be even, an even number here. And there we go. So I've got an even number across the top. And then I'm going to kind of like long press on my rectangle tool so I can access other shape tools inside of it. So here's the oval tool. Notice you also have a pen tool here. So if you're used to the pen tool from things like Illustrator, you could always use that too. So I want to draw out an oval that's pretty much exactly the same size as our rectangle in width. And then if I, oops, so you can see they joined up together. Undo, Command or Control Z, and just make sure they don't collide with one another. So a little bit different from how like Illustrator works, right? In Illustrator, you're going to use your Pathfinder tools to combine and subtract different shapes. Inside of Animate, by default, shapes that overlap with one another actually are going to combine with one another. So if I use my arrow keys to shift this down like so, and then if I click off of there and then click again, this is all one complete selection now, right? So it has merged both of those shapes together, which you may want that to happen or you might not want that to happen. In this case, we do want it to happen. I also want to do some decorative stuff around the bottom here. So let's go ahead and change my fill color to something like this bright green. And what I'm going to do is just kind of, oops, that's ugly. I want to make some circles, basically. So what these circles are going to be used to do is to cut out sort of the frilly bits at the ghost's feet. So now if I select this, you can see they're all merged because they're touching. And if I shift it up, something like that. I deselect. I select it again and hit delete. Boom. Now we've got the frilly little ghostly bits at the bottom, right? So our ghost is coming out pretty good. Let's re-enable both our frame and our pattern so we can see kind of how this is looking. So looks pretty nice. It's not exactly centered though. So let's go ahead and select our ghost. And if we look over on the side here, we have an alignment panel. Let's go ahead and align that to both the horizontal and vertical center. And it's right in the middle of our little card now, right? So something else we can do with shapes, if we use the selection tool here, if you click anywhere on the pasteboard, it's going to deselect everything on the stage, right? That's actually going to allow you to hover over the edge of any shape in order to deform it by pushing and pulling. So if I hover over the edge here and click and drag, you can kind of see how that works, right? So we just want to kind of pull it in a little bit so it's not completely shaped like that. We can also use the subselection tool, and that's going to allow us to manipulate any of these little anchor points here. So if you're used to working in Adobe Illustrator, this is going to be something that's very comfortable to you, right? We can delete certain points. So maybe I'm like, yeah, there's too many points there. Let's delete those. And maybe I want this to be just a little more rounded, right? So you can make these sorts of modifications. And it's a good way to learn how to use the pen tool, of course, but also a nice way to learn some of the ins and outs of asset creation with Adobe Animate. I'm just manipulating these ever so slightly. There we go. Yeah, so there's our little ghost. So now that we have a ghost, we need to animate the ghost. Oh, actually, he doesn't have any eyes, does he? So a proper ghost should have some eyes. So let's choose our oval tool again. And let's give him some black eyes. So ghost with eyes. And I don't want circles this time. Now, see what's happening right here is I'm actually, not holding down my shift key to make a circle, but it's still creating a circle for me. The reason for that is because of our snapping settings with our grid. So let's go to View, Grid, and let's go to View Snapping and untick Snap to Grid. And that's going to allow me to create some more proper eyes for our ghost. So that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and create a new eye just based on this one. So if I select this eye, hold down my Alt or Option key, and I click drag, I can then create my secondary eye. And there we go. We have our little ghost. And he's all ready to be animated at this point, basically. So like I said, if we wanted to use one of those bitmap images from Fresco, we could absolutely use that too. However, this guy's a little cuter, so I'm going to use him. And what we're going to do is we're going to use sort of a newish tool inside of Animate. So usually when you're doing stuff in Animate, you've got to do a bunch of things around, you got to create a bunch of keyframes. You got to like move stuff around. You got to know a lot about what you're doing. When you're using this tool, which is the Asset Warp tool right here, it looks like a little pin, similar to the Puppet tool that you may see in other applications. If I select that, this is sort of a really nice way to introduce people to some sort of subtle animation concepts, right? So once I use this Asset Warp tool, I can click on different portions of my shape. So if I click right here, you'll notice we get a nice mesh overlay the shape. This is a distortion mesh that we can use to actually change how the ghost operates. So let's put one here, 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 and here. That should be enough, right? So we've got our nice mesh here. And if we look in our object properties, we can see this is a warped object. It's a special object type inside of Animate. And we have warp options that allows us to show the mesh or hide it. And we can also change the handle mode from fixed to open. So this just determines how these little handles work, right? And the way they work is with the asset warp tool selected, you can go ahead and make changes to your mesh. So if I want to just kind of have my ghost sort of floating like this. And there we go. I've distorted that ghost, right? So he looks like that. So this is a really efficient and simple way to do animation because, you know, people understand that if you kind of stretch and move things around, how things get distorted. So it's a really easy way to introduce people to this stuff. So what I'm going to do is go out to my 2-second mark, because if you see right here in my timeline, I only have a single frame. So like if I do a test movie, which is this little button up in the upper right-hand corner, we can see I've got a nice little Halloween graphic basically right now, but there's no animation involved. So let's go up to 2 seconds. I'm going to select all these frames at the 2-second mark across each one of my layers. And then we got these little widgets above the timeline here. If I long press on this one, I can select to insert frames. That's going to insert frames up to the 2-second mark. And now I can actually move my playhead around, right? So what we're going to want to do is actually create some animation where it looks like the ghost is sort of floating, right? So let's go ahead and go to like, I don't know, frame 15 or so. And I'm going to long press again so that I can insert a keyframe. So keyframes in Animate work very similar to how keyframes work inside of After Effects and Premiere Pro, right? Keyframes hold property values, and they allow a change from keyframe to keyframe of those property values to create motion. So because I created my warped asset and my asset mesh right there, I can now go ahead on this new keyframe and shift him over a little bit. So maybe we want to have him kind of float to the other side a little bit, right? So now we've got this and this. So hey, we did it. We've got animation now, right? But we want to have it a little nicer, don't we? So let's go to, and let's see how long this is going to take, right? So notice between these two keyframes, nothing actually happens. So this is a big difference between something like Premiere, After Effects, and Animate, in that just because you create keyframes, it doesn't necessarily mean that the frames in between the keyframes are going to incrementally exhibit those changes, right? Whereas in After Effects, you know, you create keyframes, it's automatically going to do that. It's going to assume you want motion. But Animate, again, it's a more traditional animation platform. So traditional animators, they use something called frame-by-frame animation. And that's basically what we have right here, right? You just change things from frame to frame. If you've done any animation inside of Photoshop, you know, that's a common workflow in Photoshop for animated content too. Inside Animate, if you want a tween to happen in between these keyframes, you have to tell Animate that you want that. So what you got to do is select some of the frames in between, and then you've got a couple of tweening options to choose from. Oops, I did it a little fast, so let's undo. I'm going to long press on that, and you can see we can create a classic tween here. If you're using warped objects and object meshes like we are today, we want to make sure to create a classic tween. That's what's going to work. And there we go. Now we've got some nice little motion there. And let's preview it. Pretty good. Maybe I'll extend it a little bit to 20. So just clicking on that keyframe and moving it, just dragging it across the timeline right there. And let's go back to frame 40. And what I'm going to do here is insert a blank keyframe. So a blank keyframe inserts a keyframe with no content on it. So very different concept from After Effects or Premiere. However, I'm actually able to copy what I have right here and then paste it in place. And I can also create another classic tween. And then what we get is this nice looping animation, right? So to create a full loop, I'm going to go ahead and move to this end piece of the tween. And let's add another keyframe right there. Because right now we've got two keyframes that are identical. It's going to cause a little bit of a glitch, right, inside of that loop if we keep it like that. So I'm going to change it to that, and then I'm going to remove that last keyframe, or clear that keyframe. And I'm also going to remove the classic tween from there. And let's shore this up a bit. So I'm going to remove all those frames too to keep it nice and neat. All right, so let's try it out. We can do a test movie. All right, it looks pretty good, but there are things we can do to make this a little better, right? So it's very kind of like mechanical right now. So if we use some sort of easing construct, we'll be able to make this look a lot more natural and a lot more spectral. So to do that, I'm going to select both of these tweens. So just grab a bunch of frames between the tweens. It's a tongue twister. And then if we look on the frame properties up here, we can see in our tweening options, our effect right now is a classic ease. A classic ease is basically a linear ease. So if we click on this, we can choose from a whole bunch of different easing types, easing presets. I want to do an ease in and out between each one. And I just want it to be pretty subtle. So maybe something like a sine. If I double click on that, now things will look a little bit different. So you can see it's got a bit more weight to it now, right? Because we're using those eases. And we could, of course, play with that as much as we want. We could change the central frame here, the central keyframe, to adapt this. Like maybe if these little raggedy bits are getting too close together, we could change that. Or I kind of like it is. So let's keep it like that. All right. Another thing I want to do, though, is I want this little ghost to sort of float up into frame, right? So I've got this animation right here, but it's going to be kind of a pain to now go back in and make adjustments for position. And even if I want to change something like the alpha transparency, right? So what we can do is actually convert this entire layer into a symbol and then animate that symbol. So it's nesting one timeline within another. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to take my little ghost here. I'm going to right click on my ghost layer. And this is actually something that was introduced at last year's Adobe Max. And it's an option to convert layers to a symbol. So it's a much easier way of converting layers to a symbol than we had before. Before you had to like create a new symbol and then copy the layers or cut the layers from the main timeline, pop them in there. Right now it's just one action, convert layers to symbol. I want this to be a graphic symbol, and I'm going to call this Ghost. Hit OK. So now you'll notice all of my stuff goes away. So all of my little tweens and everything go away. However, they're still present in my timeline because we're using a graphic symbol here. So because we're using a graphic symbol, we can actually animate the symbol on the main timeline, and the internal animation is going to be retained. So we'll have both sets of animation going on at the same time, which is a really good way to do things. So let's go ahead and I'm going to click on this keyframe and shift it over to like the 10-second or 10 frame mark. Have him pop in there. And again, let's add some more frames to this. So let's make this, I don't know, 5 seconds long. So I'm going to insert frames up to there. We now have 5 full seconds of frames. And here what I want to do on this initial keyframe, if we look inside of our object properties, what I'm going to have is the ability to say that I want to loop this graphic forever. So I've got my loop option selected. We could always do it in reverse too, or we could set the number of loops. So if I want to do it once, or if I want to hold it on different frames, there's actually a lot of power inside of this little looping area for graphic symbol instances. So if you used to use Animate, you used to use Flash, and you haven't looked at this in a while, this is major, okay? This content here. You can set a first and last frame in order to create a sub loop and then make instructions based on keyframes in your main timeline to how the graphic symbol instance can behave. So super cool. But right now, he's just going to keep looping over and over. Look at him go, right? So what we want to do is actually animate him in. And I'm going to, I don't know, 20 frames here. Let's put another keyframe in there. And we want him to end right here, right? But over on frame 10, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select him. And let's shift him down a little bit, somewhere like here at the bottom. And I'm also going to look over here to color effects for our object. And here I want to change it to alpha. This is going to allow me to fade my little ghost out. And then, of course, if we create another classic tween right here, what happens, right? He kind of fades in, comes up, and then he continues his little dance. And we could always make him semi-transparent here too. I don't want to do that because we already have a lot of transparency going on in the background. But something else we can do is also change our easing effect. So again, choosing any of the frames that make up that tween, we can go to classic ease, and let's go ahead and ease out. And we'll use sign again. Sign's usually pretty good for a lot of stuff. Let's give that a peek. Ah, see how nice that is? He just kind of whoop, and then he's just kind of hanging out. All right. So the last thing we want to do here is have a little message for whoever's going to be viewing this. So let's add a layer and call it message. So inside my message layer, I want the message to kind of pop in around the same time the ghost does. So I'm going to go to frame 25 and let's insert a keyframe there. It's a blank keyframe since there's nothing in that layer beforehand, right? And this is going to let me put in anything I want. So what I want to do is go to my text tool, and I'm going to have static text, which means it's text that is meant to be viewed in a visual way. It's not text that you can like put values into or read from or anything like that. It's a design asset. So for character, I want to choose a nice spooky font, and I've got a couple in here. Let's see, sometimes it's so difficult to see anything. I wish we could make these a little bit bigger. I know I've got a couple. Oh, the Blackbeard might work out good. Where's Blackbeard? There it is. Some uses type called Blackbeard. I think this is an Adobe font, but you could always go to fonts.adobe.com and choose a specific font if you want. So I'm going to call this, let's just say Happy Halloween. Keep it nice and simple. Yeah, that's the font I want. All right, so let's center that in our paragraph settings. And I don't want it to be, oh, maybe I do want it to be black because that would match his eyes, which is pretty cool. And we can even hold down our Option or Alt key to duplicate this, and then double click Halloween. And if I select both of these with a shift click, I can always go to my align panel and align to the horizontal center of my stage. Then just position these a bit, give them a little bit more breathing room here and there. All right. Now the ghost pops up, Happy Halloween pops up, and then he does his little ghost dance, right? So I want this to do something a bit different, right? Let's have these fade in as well. So I'm going to select Happy Halloween, both of them, shift click. And if I right click on my selection, notice that I can also choose, wait at the bottom, to convert both of these text objects to a symbol. That's going to allow me to animate them both together, right? So let's go ahead and rename this to message. It can be a graphic symbol. That's fine. It doesn't really matter in this case. I just need it to be some sort of symbol. Let's go to 35 and insert another keyframe. So for those who aren't used to animate, you can kind of probably get the sort of the cadence of how you work in animate just by watching me do this, right? So you create your objects, you possibly create symbols out of them, you create keyframes, you change the properties on those keyframes, and then you tween the stuff, and it creates motion. It creates change, visual change across time. So now that I've got those two keyframes, again, I can create a classic tween. And there are other tweening types here. For simplicity's sake, I'm using classic tweens everywhere. And if we go over here, select that object, and my object properties, once again, color effects. And I'm going to take this alpha down to 0. Then on 35 here, you can see it's at 100%. Now we can have that, comes in pretty strong. Let's extend that a little bit. And I ease everything. All right. So I ease absolutely everything. Let's go ahead and ease out. And let's do something like a bounce. That's probably going to make it like flash a little bit, right? So let's see how that looks. Whoa, that didn't. Just a little tiny bit, huh? Let's change that to a bounce ease in. Ease in, bounce. There we go. That's more of a flash, right? It almost looks like a neon sign turning on. Perfect. And that's it. It looks like it's pretty much done, right? So if we preview, there's our little spooky ghost animation for Halloween, right? Got a nice little message for everybody. Now, what can we do with this, right? Now that we've got it, there are a number of different publish and export options inside of Animate, right? Like I said before, it's not like you're constrained to a specific platform. We can go to File, Export, and we can export this as an image. We can export it as a movie, which is like an image sequence or something of that nature. We can export it as video. So this will actually send it to Adobe Media Encoder to use any of the presets inside of there to create your video. We can also do animated GIF. So these are some kind of manual ways to do it, but there are other ways. If we look up here, we've got a little quick share and publish button. And this button has been available inside of Animate for a couple of years, and it actually predates similar buttons in other applications, which is kind of cool, like Premiere. So if I click on this, I can choose to quick publish or do a social share. So if I choose quick publish right here, I can publish as an MP4 file or as an animated GIF file, right? However, I want to do a social share. For social share, right now I can choose Twitter or YouTube, but notice more social sharing channels are coming soon, right? So let's go ahead and publish as an animated GIF. That should be easy enough. So if I choose animated GIF and hit publish, you can see GIF export in progress. And there we go, exported successfully, spooky.gif. That's pretty scary. Let's go ahead and open that up. So one way to, and my students have trouble with this a lot. If I open up Twitter here or open up a web browser and go into Finder, here it is, my spooky.gif, right? So it previews really nice inside there. Let's pull that into the web browser. And there we can see it running in the web browser as an animated GIF file. So super easy to create a fun little spooky animated GIF like this for Halloween. However, social share too, right? So here's my Twitter feed. Hey, there's Tom Green, fellow AEL. Hey, Tom. Let's go ahead and publish this too. So I'm going to click on that again, do a social share this time instead of publish. I'm going to click on Twitter. And here it gives me a little bit of preview. And it puts in some little hashtags here. Let's also add Adobe EDU Creative. That's always sounds wrong to me. I always found Create EDU a better hashtag for this sort of stuff, but I guess that's what we're using now. So Adobe EDU Creative, made with Adobe Animate. There we go. And then a bunch of hashtags. You don't have to get too crazy with it, right? So let's go ahead and share. So you can see it's publishing and it's generating video in Adobe Media Encoder. So sometimes this gets a little stuck, right? So if you've used Media Encoder for other workflows, it's probably gotten stuck for you before too. That's one of the reasons I like to open Media Encoder first. And you can see right now, it's not showing up. Sometimes it takes a little while to actually kind of hook up to Media Encoder. So let's cross our fingers that it happens for us today. Come on, buddy.
That's a lot of fun. That's so amazing.
We'll just leave him be for now. This does work. It's just, I don't know why. I think part of it might be because I have like pre-release versions of different stuff on here, you know, and it gets a little confused as to which one it should open. But usually you can kind of kick it. Let's hit cancel here and try it again. Publishing canceled.
So saying hello to Javen Slowson, who's joining from the Philippines. Hello. And Citizen joining from Ghana. Good evening from Ghana. Here, I'll show you. Good evening from Ghana. Happy to be here and would like to connect with other educators and Adobe experts to learn more about how to use Adobe. So in the right place for today's workshop and session on some fun animations.
Yeah, hey everyone. Thanks for joining.
Did you get it?
Yep, it worked.
Awesome.
So shared successfully, view in browser. So let's go ahead and revisit my Twitter feed here. And there it is.
Oh, that's so cool.
Look at him. There he goes. What a nice little guy. Happy Halloween, everyone. I'm actually not a fan of Halloween. I find it kind of, I mentioned this on my Behance stream today because I was drawing some spooky stuff. I did a kind of neat little painting. Let me see if I can pull that up. Oh, I'd like to hear from everybody. Like, what do you all, any of you using Animate for anything?
Here, I'll do this one.
Yeah, so this is the creepy little painting we did on my Behance stream today. It's kind of nice. So this was done using Fresco, not Animate. But yeah.
That's exciting.
Spooky stuff for Halloween.
I can see that being very, very fun. And the options of either exporting, as a file or sharing socially as a quick share is really handy. You know what I thought we could do is quickly run the steps once more. So we start with choosing our image and then we create the object.
Yeah, and I can even, let's do this, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So check out how versatile this is. So I'm going to lock everything down and I'm going to unlock my ghost layer here. And if I double click on that layer, I can go inside of the symbol, right? So if I want to replace this, right? So let's go ahead and just like, I'm going to right click on here and just make this a guide layer and turn off the visibility. That's going to basically make it not publish anymore. And let's replace it with a bitmap image. So if I click new layer, and I'm just going to make it completely match what we did so far. It's going to be like super quick, but it'll go through that workflow again. So here, if you remember, here's this little ghost. Let's do this little jack-o'-lantern here. Let's pull him in. And he's too big, but we can use our free transform tool to fix him up a little, right? So yeah, you can make different variants of these things.
Wow.
So whether you have a vector object or a bitmap image like this is something I drew in Fresco again. You can use the asset warp tool and just start pinning, right? So maybe for this, I'm going to pin right there, right there, right there, and right there. Let's make it really simple. Go over here, set a keyframe, go over here, set a keyframe. So we got 3 keyframes, and let's change the middle one. So we'll just kind of pull these mesh pins here and there, make them a little, yeah, he's going to be a little scary there. I'm not sure how a pumpkin would actually move. A ghost, I understand. Pumpkin is a bit different.
He'll move his mouth, I guess. Huh?
So hopefully I didn't completely destroy him, but we're going to do a classic tween here. And I did destroy him. So what I did is I added an extra point, an extra mesh point when I was creating that. Instead of clicking on the existing mesh point, which I meant to do, I actually clicked to create another mesh point, which I didn't mean to do. You have to be kind of careful. Let's go ahead and select him again. Yeah, so I had 2 mesh points here by mistake. So you got to be careful. And now if I select all these layers, classic tween, it's going to think. And that looks a lot better, huh? Well, I don't know if that works so much. He looks like a weird breathing. Looks like he's breathing like really heavy. I don't know if I like that. Anyway, let's apply that sine ease out to him. And then we'll go back to scene 1. And let's go ahead and preview that. Yeah, so this is a little different, right? Because it's using a bitmap image instead of... it worked out pretty good, huh?
I think so. Yeah. And that was so quick. Amazing.
Yeah, so it's a really simple workflow to like get people doing. And like I said, especially like you don't have to be like, you know, a design student at university to do stuff like this. You can absolutely do it, you know, in elementary school and middle school and high school, of course, and so on.
Wow, that's amazing. That's wonderful.
I came out pretty good, actually.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Okay, so to follow Joseph, let me add how you can reach him through the Adobe Education Exchange. Here we are. Thank you, Joseph, for sharing your expertise today and inspiring educators and students to create their own animations, especially for such a fun season and making such fun projects. And then for also pointing out the really handy quick social share. Love that. Love that. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, awesome. And so thank you everyone for joining us today. Ali joining from Pakistan. We have Joseph always inspires as he demos. We also have Citizen, as I mentioned, joining from Ghana, and Javan from the Philippines. So thank you all for commenting and sharing today's workshop. And you're invited to join us for next week. Next week we have Stephen Burns, who will be presenting on October 27th. Stephen will be sharing integrating 3D into Composite with perspective. So we are excited and looking forward to that very special presentation as well. And don't forget to follow Joseph on behance.net, and I'll share that with you as well. Anything else, Joseph?
No, except I do hope that people try this out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you do try it out, you know, send it to me. Let me see. Let me
That
see
would
what
be
kind of like
awesome.
weird stuff you make.
That would be great. Love it. Love it. And once you register for Adobe Max, you'll be able to join Joseph and others as the creative ambassadors at Adobe Max. So that's adobemax.braindate.com, and that will be next week. So we look forward to connecting with you then. So until then, we wish you continued inspiration and creativity and joyful creativity with your students and colleagues. So thank you all for joining, and we will see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.